Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building. It's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? Happy New Year, Corey Jacobson.
Well, Happy New Year to you.
Oh, thank you, and Happy New Year to the audience. I wonder if they wondered what happened to us.
Well, I think an explanation's probably in order.
Well, you know, I did this whole mountain tough thing and got all in shape, and it was a great season. And man, I was so excited coming into the new year. And then Santa Claus brought me pneumonia for Christmas. You know, the last podcast we did, I just got back from Arizona and I had some sort of bug or whatever. And I got over that for 2 or 3 days. And then I went to Vegas and did the Hunter and Outdoor Christmas, which is what the Elk Foundation puts together.
Yep.
As part of National Finals Rodeo. And I was down there, what do we call it? Shaking hands and kissing babies. I have a great time down there because it's more laid back. You get to talk to so many fun people. Well, just hanging around in Vegas and the mosh pit that place is.
You're lucky you only caught pneumonia.
Yeah, exactly. I woke up, we're flying home on Sunday morning. I think that was like the 15th or something. And I told my wife, I'm like, Kim, I'm really sick. She's like, well, mask up in case you got something. We don't want to give it to the folks on the airplane. So we get to the airport and I'm feeling all right. And then about the time we land in Bozeman, I'm ready to die. I'm thinking, you know what? I got something here. The Chinese have brought the Hongwu flu back, and I'm patient 0. That night as an adult, I've never had a fever pushing 103, but I did that night. Yeah. Kim said I was delirious and whatever. I don't remember any of it. But, so
It's probably not the first time Kim has said you're delirious.
So I ended up with bacterial pneumonia. Do you know the difference? There's all these different types of pneumonia. What's the difference in any of them? They all kill you.
Yeah, I think pneumonia is pneumonia, but
yeah. So I laid on the couch until Christmas Day almost. And so when you were texting me and emailing me, I apologize for anything I replied that was incoherent or more incoherent than the norm. So yeah,
that's where you've been. Yeah. No, I'm glad you sound like you're doing better. So.
Oh yeah. Have you ever been to the beach in the ocean and heard seals barking?
Yeah.
And they get all excited. That's what it sounded like for me. I'd lay on the couch and my core strength is really improved because when you cough that hard when you're laying down, it's like doing these hollow hold core exercises.
Yep.
But then my niece flew out the day after Christmas, and I promised her for her high school graduation,
Right.
I would take her on a Wyoming elk hunt. And it's taken her so long to draw that she graduated college since then. She got married, and she's been a teacher for 2 years. That's she finally drew. But we went. She had this little window of time, pretty much like 4.5 days, that we could go down to Wyoming and try to get her an elk. So that's. I was in no condition. I was just like, oh, I hope this runs slightly uphill from the road here.
Yeah. That's just a tough time of year to hunt anyway. Just snow and cold weather and not feeling good. That's so how'd it go?
Well, this is a migration hunt, and when they migrate through this area, they hammer these haystacks in this one area that's got a few private land pieces in it, and so they've built this boundary that's really a weird small area, and they have some feed grounds around there, and that's another topic. But the purpose of the feed grounds is to get all the elk over there so they don't hammer these haystacks. But there's a few derelict bulls that, for whatever reason, just feel like, heck with that feed ground stuff. I like this fresh alfalfa that's stacked up here. And so every year there's a handful of bulls that hit these haystacks. So that's what you're hunting, is you're trying to get these misbehaved bulls that, for whatever reason, don't want to go to the feed ground. So
no, just bulls are loners, especially the bigger bulls this time of year. They don't usually hang out anywhere close to the crowds. There's more competition for feed, even though it's free feed and you don't have to work for it. Those bulls will just a lot of times stay kind of out in the periphery and just scavenge for any little bit of feed they can find. But if there's a hay pile there, he's not really scavenging. He's just bucking the trend of the rest of the herd.
Yeah, but the amount of snow. When we left Bozeman, we had 2 inches of snow on the ground. I'm like, man, this is not good. Those elk aren't going to have migrated. By the time we got to Alpine, now there's a foot of snow. Wow. By the time we get further and further into the mountains, there's 30, 40 inches of snow. And the forecast is calling for, every day we're there, like 5 inches, 8 inches. I'm like, how are we going to see anything if it's snowing that hard? So, the elk had already migrated through. It's one of those deals where migration hunts, right? Yep. They are the biggest crapshoot in all of hunting. I don't care if it's mule deer or elk. Like last year, Marcus had this tag. It was the first year, and fortunately, we live 4 or 5 hours away. So he went down 5 times. And the last week of season, the last part of January, he finally got a bull.
Wow!
And I looked at the harvest reports from last year. Of the 10 tag holders, only 3 shot a bull last year. Wow. And I'm sure all 10 of them are like, oh boy, this is slam dunk. I'm going to shoot a 350-inch bull. Marcus did 5 trips last year, and they skied and hiked and snowshoed every square inch of that little spot. And he told me, he said, I'm never applying for that unit ever again. Don't try to talk me into that. Well, I told him, I said, well, the only hunt dates that fit Sydney's window is the same hunt you had as last year. He's like, you're a fool if you apply for that. So I told Sydney, I said, Marcus claims we're fools if we apply for this. She's like, well, it's the only time I can go, and I want to go. I'm like, okay. So we applied. She drew one of the non-resident tags because by now she's got a stack full of points. So we spent a lot of time in a truck driving around looking for fresh tracks in the snow crossing the road. Because what it is there's a road that loops. The boundary definition is this county road.
Wow.
It's a big loop. So when you can't see anything more than 50 yards away, you just, maybe we'll see some fresh tracks. Maybe we'll. And so you do these loops. Pretty soon I look and everyone in the truck is falling asleep except for me. And they are as bored as all get out. And, but you just can't see anything. I mean, it's snowing that hard and there's so much snow. The guy on the grader who does the county road, he's a good good dude. He would see us coming, he'd pull off to the side, and he was making loops just like we were, but we'd do like 3 loops to his one. I wasn't gonna flag him down and say, "Hey, you ever see any elk sitting up there in that grader?" Because we haven't. So
I bet he does when it's not snowing so hard.
Yeah, I bet he does too. Yeah. And so the first 3 days we didn't see a track, didn't see an elk.
Wow.
We just saw a lot of snow. And then the evening of the 3rd day, it cleared off just for a little bit. And there were 5 bulls about 800 yards from the unit. And all I could think is, oh, I hope one of you guys like haystacks.
Yeah.
And the next morning, we get up. We're way before dark. We see one set of elk tracks going into the unit. Like, well, I don't know what he is or she is. Hard to say. And then about 8 in the morning, we make this loop. And Marcus looks over there. He's like, hey, I think I see fresh elk tracks leaving that haystack. And we glass, and sure enough, through 40 inches of snow is this big, wide path of this or these elk having pushed through the snow. And we get to looking up on the Forest Service up above where these haystacks are, and that bull is bedded under a big spruce tree. I'm like, all right, folks, this is not a dress rehearsal. There's no preseason game here. This is going to be our one chance, and we better make it work.
Yeah.
And trudging through snow. Fortunately, we had snowshoes and skis, or I'd still be trying to get in there. And with me hacking and coughing.
I was just going to say, that's you had to be on low lung capacity there for sure.
Yeah. And with the wind and shooting angle, the only route we could take was go up this ridge above him, because it was just too thick coming in from his elevation or whatever. And when you come in from above, it gives you better shooting angles anyhow. Something does happen. Well, on top of that ridge, in this little saddle, when I stepped off this old snowmobile trail that had about 20, probably 2 feet of snow in it, when I stepped off that, the snow was almost to my armpits. How are we going to do this? This is ridiculous. And I snuck up there and could see him bedded. And I stack one pack and it sinks in the snow. Sydney, I need your pack. Stack her pack on top of it. It just sinks deeper in the snow. Hey, Ethan, her husband, I need your pack. Finally, we're above the snow, but it's still so low she can't get a shot. Hey, Marcus, I need your pack.
Not only that's just to get there and get the shot, but then I can't imagine packing it out in that deep of snow. That's no fun.
No. So that's the problem, is she shot it. It was bedded with its butt downhill from us, head uphill by us. And it wasn't a broadside bedding, it was lengthways. So it's like, Sydney, you got to thread that thing right into the front shoulder. This is not easy. And she shot. She waited for about 10 minutes, and finally she shot. And with my suppressor, I could hear the crack of something. You heard the poof, and then crack. And he stood up and he starts walking to the left through this deep snow. And Marcus hit the cow call, and he looked around, and she shot him again. And that was the end of the story. But so we got to go off this huge cornice. If it was a taller ridge, I wouldn't have dared do it, because I would have feared avalanche.
Yeah.
So trying to remember who went first. Ethan, Sydney's husband, went first, and he's soaking wet. He's maybe 140 pounds, and you just see him going through on this cornice. The snow has drifted so deep that all you see is he's to his armpits now, and he's not hitting solid ground. Well, then Sydney goes behind him, and then here comes the big fat accountant. He wallows down through there. By the time I get through there, we had a pretty wide path beat down, but it was just so steep.
Yeah.
And Marcus had his skis with skins on them. He'd done this before. He just skis down there.
Man.
Nothing to this stuff. So then we get this thing all cut up, and we're like, all right, now we got to pack this thing up that ridge through that deep, fluffy, soft snow.
Yeah.
So
How
we
was
earned
that?
it. Well, I think they thought I had tuberculosis or something, that I might be spitting out part of a lung. So I carried a front quarter and half of the trim on the first load. I was getting everyone's packs loaded and everything, and they're starting to go. Well, Ethan did 2 trips with hindquarters. Sydney did 2 trips with back straps, tenderloins. They had all of her gear, the rifle, everything. And then Marcus did 2 trips. So they took it easy on me. Once I made my trip, I was going to go back down. They're like, no, we got it all. I'm like, well, you guys are all half my age, so I'm going to let you guys come back up this ridge.
Man,
And
that's the way to do it.
yeah, I felt pretty good about that. But in 5 days, that was the only bull we saw in the unit.
That's crazy.
I would never apply for that tag again.
Well, especially where you have such a small window of availability that she can hunt.
Right.
You're kind of locked in. You get that weather, and I mean, maybe the weather was a good thing, but I think usually by the end of December, the elk that are going to migrate have probably migrated.
Yeah. Oh, we rented an Airbnb way further down the winter range. And at night, you felt like you're going to run over 5 or 6 elk on the way at night in the headlights. There's so many elk down lower. Like, well, last year when Marcus had the tag, they were all up higher. This year, they've already migrated through, which illustrates the roll of the dice these migration hunts are.
Yeah.
And I think if you were a local, it might be worthwhile, right? Every morning before work, you go check it out. But no, it's the luckiest. This season, the elk hunts we had, we got so lucky. I'd like to call it skill, Corey, but it's just nothing but luck.
Hey, I'll take luck any day. And anybody that thinks there's not some luck involved in elk hunting, you haven't done it long enough. Yeah, there's certainly knowing how to find them, knowing where they are, but you still have to get lucky to some degree.
Yeah.
There's just too many things that have to go right.
Yeah. By the time this happened, if that would have been a spike bull, Sydney was going to shoot it. He lucked out, and it was a really nice 6-point.
That's cool.
But the funny part, you walk up there to him, and when you roll his head over, you know how when they rub on trees after they're rubbing their velvet, they got a lot of bark at the burr and the base of their head?
Yeah.
This guy had hay everywhere. He had hay in his ears. He had hay around the antlers. He had hay buried into the bridge of his nose in his teeth. So we called him Haystack Hank.
That's so funny.
But anyhow, that's where I've been.
Did you build a fire while you were cutting him up?
You know, we'd thought about it, but the snow had stopped and the sun came out and it was 35 degrees. That morning when we first got there, it was 2 below. And
I think 35 degrees is still fire weather. I think you can have a fire when it's 35.
Oh, well, I think we're all just too wore out. But because by the time you stomp all the snow down to where you can do the gut and gill
dry branches, and you're warmed up.
And then there's this aspen tree that has stacks of snow on the limbs. And Marcus is doing a time lapse of us gutting and gilling, and that every time the wind blows, some of that snow falls off that aspen tree down the back of my neck. I told Ethan, I'm going to pull my hood up, kick that aspen tree, and knock all that snow out of there, so get it out of the way. So he does that, and a bunch falls down. I slide my hood up back in the normal position, and I look up, and the last snowball about the size of a wheelbarrow breaks free and comes right down on my face. Marcus, in his time lapse, his series of photos, has this picture of me looking at his camera with just two little dots of my eyes and my mouth. Everything else is white. That was when I wanted a fire started, but we were pretty well along by that time. But anyhow, for whatever that's worth, that's what this tuberculosis patient has been doing for the last 3 weeks.
You didn't let bacterial pneumonia slow you down, that's for sure.
Wow. If it was my tag and not my niece's tag that has waited 7 years, I don't know what I would have done. But, well.
Yeah, good for you. That's fun.
Yeah, you know how it is when you can go out and hunt with your family. You know, Sydney, she's 23, I think. She has 24. I don't know how old she is. 23, going to be 24. But she's a fanatic hunter. I mean, she is serious about hunting. When she's in high school, she'd come home from school, go jump in the deer blind, sit out there by herself, shoot a deer, drag it in, gut it, and do it all herself. And so, probably like in your family and my family, this is just an expression of how the times we share and the memories we have, 99% of them are around hunting and fishing.
Yep.
It was a ton of fun from that.
And those are special memories too. That's just, I've said forever that hunting provides so many opportunities as a parent to, bond with your kids, but to spend quality time. There's nothing like laying in a tent in the dark at night, not able to fall asleep and having conversations with your kids that you would never have otherwise. Like it just, I don't know, it relaxes them to the point where they're willing to talk to their parents as teenagers. And some of the most special memories I have, they're on hunts, but they aren't about hunting. It's just hunting provides that opportunity and that platform.
Yeah. And her husband, Ethan, grew up in the same part of the world that I did and Sydney did, where everyone hunts and fishes. And I can almost tell, even in their young 20s, so many of the life skills they've learned through hunting are with them. Like, I think it was that evening of the third day when we finally saw some bulls. I'm like, Sid, I'm so sorry. This is not turning out to be what we'd hoped it would. And she's like, look, I've hunted enough. I know you can't control everything. Okay. Don't worry about it. We're having a good time. Whereas I think some people who didn't grow up in a hunting life, they think you get to control everything, right? Because on your video game, you get to control the volume and the speed. And she's like, well, that's hunting. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. And I just observing her and Ethan and their approach to things. It's like, you can tell these kids grew up hunting. They get it that there's no sure things. They were super prepared when the time came. It's like, all right, we're all dialed in, off we go. And they made the most of it. And, when the project's
ready to capitalize on the one opportunity that you might get.
Yeah. And, they'd look at the weather forecast every day and they're like, well, can't do anything about the weather. Let's, got any place we can go look at some mule deer or some elk or whatever? So we did. On some of those days, we drove a couple hours and went and looked at deer on the winter range. We went up to Jackson, looked at elk on the refuge. There's a maturity that I think comes with young people who've grown up hunting.
Absolutely.
There are life skills, and we've talked about that before on this podcast of how you just learn so much with hunting that, the uncontrollables, the fact that you're going to fail 9 out of 10 times, just so many of those things. And watching the two of them, it kind of brought a big smile to me to be like, yep, two more hunters entering the adult world here.
Yep. Well, that's awesome.
So,
and what a cool thing you do for your nieces to hunt with them as a graduation present. That's, and we did, I kind of this year I like Christmas. I'm a gift giver. I like giving gifts, and I think it's maybe an expression of love to be able to give a gift to someone. But I also, at the same time, my wife's really good about recognizing that gifts are just things. They're things that, if you ask the kids, what did you get for Christmas 10 years ago? Like, I don't remember. And so this year I was listening to another podcast, and they're talking about, just how short life really is and how many opportunities you really have. And, talking, average life expectancy is 77, 78 years old. And if you're 50, you only got 25, maybe 30 years left on average.
Yeah.
But you don't have 25 years. You have 24, 25 more times to hunt elk. That's if you get to hunt all the way up there, but most people quit hunting by age 65. And so that window is really small. So anyway, it was, between that, just that, hey, things are important, and gifts, things aren't as important. I got thinking, when you're a teenager, my son, Sam, my youngest son, he's 18. And for him, vehicles are he loves Toyota Tacomas. He loves exotic cars. He saved and bought a really nice Toyota Tacoma all on his own. We didn't help him at all. And that's important to him. But I got thinking, every vehicle you own, no matter how nice it is or how much you love it, you end up selling it someday. Yeah. Every house you own, you end up moving out of it and selling it. You might live in your last house for a time and be there, but all these things, all these possessions that we're trying to acquire, we end up either losing or getting rid of, and we can't take it with us. But experiences and memories of those experiences are something that we can keep. And so for Christmas this year, I didn't give gifts. I gave experiences to each of my kids. And cool. I asked them from that podcast, I just said, hey, just completely random, like in October or sometime, I said, if you only had 6 months left to live, what would be the top 5 things you would want to do or want to accomplish? And they're like, Dad, is everything okay? And I'm like, no, totally. I just listened to a podcast, and it just, it made me think, what do I want to accomplish if I only had 6 months left? What are things that are truly important? Because I think we have bucket lists that we talk about forever, but we don't a lot of times make those bucket list items happen because they're just a dream and we don't ever pursue it. And then you talk to somebody that gets a diagnosis or something, and they're like, I'm going to go do this. And so, I think it's important to look at that. And so I just asked them, and it was funny, my boys, of course, everything was around either fast cars or hunting and fishing, which is awesome. There could have been different things, but yeah, I'm super excited because now I get to go on those adventures and experience those things with each of them, one-on-one. And that was the thing that I told them, that, hey, we're going to do this, and it's going to be me and you, and we're going to go and do that, and that's your present this year. And they were honestly more excited about those opportunities. Some of them don't even cost, hardly anything, but they're more excited about that than if they would have gotten some big present. So it was cool. I just did, kind of a turning of a page for me, and an eye-opening, a little bit of a change that I think was for the better.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, one of those experiences involves elk hunting. So,
it's funny. My brother has 4 daughters, and my sister has 4 kids, boys and girls. And my oldest niece, Courtney, by the time I got to where I was doing this stuff, she already graduated, and she's got kids and everything. So it was a little bit different for her. But for the rest of them, I told them, look, I'll try to make your graduation, but I'm usually bear hunting in Alaska. But if I don't make your high school graduation, or even if I do, I don't want to just go there and be one of 300 people at your reception that night. I want to do something with you that's a week of time, just me and you. And so that's how this kind of originated. My nephew Cody took him to New Mexico on an elk hunt. He shot a bull. took my niece Jordan to Alaska on a black bear hunt, and she had the worst weather I've ever. I mean, this is a pretty high bar to exceed the worst weather I've ever seen in Southeast Alaska, but she somehow managed to hit it at the wrong time. But we had a great time, and then I just did Sydney's hunt, and it just, for me, being able to spend a week with them, watching them be in their element, and have some challenges, have some things we got to overcome, and sit around a campfire, sit around, hunting. You just get a lot of conversation time and time that I would otherwise never get with my nieces and nephews. And that's really important to me. And from what I gather, anyhow, it's been very heartfelt for them also. So
Absolutely.
that's where it originated. And I think it goes back to what you said, memories and experiences are far more meaningful than, whatever tangible stuff you might give as a gift. But so, anyhow, it's that time of year, where we got to start thinking about applications.
It is. And you just got back from Wyoming, and I think Wyoming's up first on the application deadlines.
Yeah, January 31st. You at least got to have your application in. And you can modify it, I think, until sometime in early May. And they don't give their final numbers until April, so it's good they leave the modification window open. But
is it truly a modification window, or is it an opportunity to collect interest?
Yeah, I know.
They hold our money for longer than the U.S. Treasury, but
yeah, I took the bait on their marketing scheme where they called it an opportunity window. Yeah, it probably as a financial decision, but so you at least gotta have it in by the 31st of January, or you're out of luck. You can buy if you want a point, you get to do that later in the year. But and speaking of points, how many people in Wyoming have at least one elk point? How many non-residents? Because they don't have a point system for residents.
Yeah.
195,000 non-residents have somewhere between 1 and I don't know what it is, 20 or 21 points. So if you take that 195,000, add in the 8,000 who drew last year, they got over 200,000 non-residents in their system.
And how many tags do they give to non-residents a year?
About 8,000 a year.
Yeah.
So a huge number of that 195,000 have double-digit points. So at $50 a point, they're already into it $500 worth of points. So they're not going anywhere. Right? They already got the hook set on those folks.
Yep.
But I sat down. This is the accountant in me, right? Over the weekend, bored. I don't know if I was bored or Kim wanted me to go blow snow, and I just told her I told her I was busy, so I had to figure out some way to look busy.
Tell her you were bored.
So I did the math. If you multiply 195,000 times 50, I think I came up with $9,750,000 just in selling elk points. Wow. That doesn't count sheep points or moose points or antelope points or deer points.
Yeah.
The 8,000 non-resident licenses they sell, where half of them are at the high price special, or 40% are at the high price special and 60% are at the low price regular, comes to 8.5 million. So they make more money selling points to us suckers who don't want to lose our place in line than they make actually selling the tags. So anyone who thinks Wyoming's point scheme is going away, I got news for you. That is the proverbial golden goose.
Totally.
That is, I mean, think about how many jobs that funds at Wyoming Game and Fish.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say this to them because they might listen, and their legislature's in session right now, like every other state. And when a legislature is in session, nobody's hunting or property is safe. So, but I bet you if they raised the fee to $80 per elk point, they wouldn't lose hardly anybody because they got us all sucked into the system.
Totally. You gotta pay to play, and it's the game that the states are playing. So if we want in, that's the game we got to play, and that's and it's I don't know. You look at 195,000 point holders for elk in Wyoming, and 8,000 tags a year. Even if you're thinking I've got 5 points here, that's 20 years, 25 years just for those 195,000 people to get their tags. But there's going to be people drawing general tags for whatever it is now, 4 or 5 points. They're going to go through there a whole bunch of times. So the people who are in that 10 plus point range, you get rid of the general tags out of those 8,000 tags, and there's not nearly as many of those double digit point units and point tags available. And so the people holding on for that are just, it's years and years. These point systems and it's only going to get worse. Colorado going to draw for non-residents, no more over the counter there. Idaho has a panel right now discussing how do we distribute non-resident tags, because this whole debacle that we've got in Idaho probably isn't the best system for us. Well, the only system available is a draw, and hopefully we can keep them away from points. But it's just where I'm going with that is more and more people are going to get funneled to all of these states. The ability to get a tag is going to get harder and harder, and points are not the answer. So hopefully, when it comes up in some of the few holdouts that still don't have points, the general public can make enough of an outcry that, no, we don't want this situation where we have to wait 25 years to get a general tag anymore. I'm okay with everybody having an equal chance each year.
Yeah. Well, it's this is where people are going to say, Newberg, you must really be bored if you're going to nerd out to this degree. But back to your point about the number of folks who have double-digit points who are applying for a real small handful of tags, the premium tags, of which non-residents only get 16% of the limited entry tags, and they make up the difference with these general tags. I did the churn rate. In other words, how many people at the double-digit point level fell out of the system from the year before either because they drew or they just bailed. Because if you had 10 last year, you should have 11 this year. So what's that delta? If you had 11 last year, you should have 12 this year. How many did we lose that were at 11 last year that didn't make it to 12 this year? That churn rate is really, really, really small.
Yeah.
Which tells me those folks waiting around, oh boy, I'm going to draw a unit, whatever. There's only one non-resident tag or two non-resident tags. Corey, you just talked about that life expectancy thing earlier. Some of these people believe that they're going to live to be older than Methuselah based on where they're at in the point system and how many people are in front of them.
Yep.
So, for whatever that is worth, folks.
I was just going to say, I'll tell you from experience, I'm sure you'd say the same thing, but there's a certain point when going on a tough elk hunt just isn't as appealing anymore from an age standpoint. And so I think the whole moral of this story is go hunt elk now.
Yeah.
It's not going to get easier to draw tags. It's not going to get better. It's not going to get, simpler for you in life. Go hunt elk now.
Yeah. And, I think if there's one benefit that comes with having started this multi-state application stuff back in the 90s like I did, is I have drawn some, if you want to call them, glory tags. But I have had more fun, and the number of quality elk I have shot on low point total tags or general tags or over-the-counter tags because I've been on way more of those than I have waiting in line for my glory tag.
Yeah.
It's it's if anyone wants to benefit from my personal experience, it is just what you said. Go and hunt more times rather than wait around for that one time.
Yep. Well, and it goes back to those experiences.
Yeah.
You want one experience, or would you rather have 4 or 5 of those? Maybe not quality elk, but still can be a quality experience. And I'm with you. Some of my greatest elk hunting memories are not from those hard to draw tags that I've drawn. They're from over-the-counter grinds when something works out.
Yeah. And a lot of times you draw this supposed really premium tag and it's a drought year.
Yeah.
Or it's supposed to be a migration hunt and the migration still hasn't happened. Or you end up in a situation where, who knows what it might be. A bad year when, the elk hunting in that unit on that year was not anything like you dreamed it was going to be.
Yeah.
There's so many things that have to align perfectly, even on a glory tag, for you to have this hunt you think you're going to get because you saw somebody on the cover of a magazine.
Yep. Well, and I just think there's so much higher expectation that hunt's going to be so much better that when it's not, I think it's more disappointing. You go into a over-the-counter general type tag in most Western states, if you're able to get a tag, and it's going to be tough. You know what the odds are, what the chances of success are. You know that you're going to be competing with a lot of other people, and you go in it and have success on a hunt like that. I think it's far more rewarding than going into a glory hunt and having success on it. And I think the chances of being disappointed on an over-the-counter hunt are a lot lower just because your expectations are so much lower.
Yeah, I would say the number of hunters who have unmet expectations is way higher than than on a glory hunt than just a over-the-counter general hunt.
Yep.
I don't think it's even close.
Yeah.
But oh well.
And there's still, we talk, and after I get done on a lot of these podcasts, I think, man, I was really negative. I said a lot of negative things, just about the future of elk hunting, and it's not getting any easier. But with that being said, there are still opportunities. You have to plan a little more now. You have to be a little more intentional. You can't just wake up, August 15th and be like, I'm going to go elk hunting this fall. If you're a non-resident, that's getting really hard to do, but there's still a lot of opportunities where you can go and hunt elk in the West as a non-resident every single year. You just have to have a little bit more of a strategy and a game plan set up ahead of time to do it.
Yeah. So it is what it is. It reemphasizes to me that I know a ton of people are probably thinking, oh, Newberg, you say this every time. But if we really want to change or at least ease some of these frustrations that might be this negative tone that you mentioned, let's put more elk on the mountain.
And I was thinking about it. I seriously spent a lot of time the last month thinking, we talk a lot about that, but what does that really mean? How do we put more elk on the mountain? It's not a matter of going and putting them on a train and bringing them in from somewhere else. They've done that before, and that's how you grow populations in places that don't have elk. But there's so many other complicating factors now with private land, and we've talked about it before. But in Idaho, our population is fine. Our overall population of elk in Idaho, I would say, is stable, and it's healthy. Mm-hmm. But the number of elk that have gotten pushed onto big sections of private land that aren't accessible has gone up so much that the actual huntable population of elk in the last 20 years is not even a fraction of what it used to be. And so those are the elk that we're trying to find during season. So for us, it's way more difficult. We hear these numbers that, the elk population's above objective or at objective, but why can't I find any elk? And then we start to, it's non-resident, it's all these out-of-staters. No, it's the wolves. It's all these, there's a lot of things that have contributed to that. But how do we put more elk on the mountain? I think access is a huge thing. We've got to get more access. Just the more land we have, there are elk on pieces of land that we can't access. And so if we're able to access that, that's more elk on the landscape. But another thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is how many elk predators kill a year. And if we want to put more elk on the landscape, we can go and hunt predators. And that's something I've done since I was 12. I shot my first bear and my first mountain lion when I was 12. And, I love predator hunting. I think because, at the heart of it, it just extends hunting season into other seasons and other times of the year. But I also recognize the value of using hunting as a management tool and how important it is to manage predators. But you think about some of these areas in Colorado and Idaho and Montana, even Wyoming, black bears are a huge issue the number of elk calves that are killed in the spring. So simply by hunting bears in the spring or the fall, you're saving multiple elk. One bear killed saves multiple elk. So hunters going out and buying a bear tag and actively hunting elk, not just incidentally during elk season, but going out and spending a week's vacation time or a 4-day weekend hunting bears in the spring, it's going to make a difference. It's putting more elk on that landscape. Same with wolves. Mountain lions aren't as easy to hunt as bears and even wolves. I think realistically, you can to go out in the winter and target a mountain lion without using hounds is a pretty tough task. We can get lucky and find them. Hard. And there's a few people that, know where to be looking, and they put in the time and they sit behind glass and they finally spot a mountain lion and shoot one. But bears are a lot easier to hunt. And I think the effect of bears on elk is equally per animal is equally as significant on the population of elk. When you look at, there's a lot more bears than mountain lions in most states. I think you can be more effective hunting bears. Wolves are a big one because they're tough to hunt. The time of year when they're probably most susceptible to hunting is a time when people don't usually go out and want to, traipse through 3 feet of snow and try to find a wolf pack to keep tabs on them. But I just think the more that we do on the predator side, that's adding elk to the landscape, and you think, well, if I just shoot one bear, how much does that really make a difference? Well, it does make a difference. And when you get thousands of hunters out there actively involved in it, it's going to make a difference. Nothing that we're going to do is going to be an overnight success and turn the needle from 0 to 100. But if we can all just chip in little ways, and you think about projects the RMEF does and different things, those are important, absolutely. But if you want to put more elk on the landscape, I think access and predator hunting are going to be 2 things that every elk hunter needs to be actively looking at and finding a way to be involved in.
Yeah, and that's where we all have a responsibility, if you want to call it that, or a role. And I think hunters, because we like being outdoors, it's something you can feel like, all right, I'm doing something, I'm participating in this conservation effort when I'm out hunting, say, black bears. Yeah, that's something we're inclined to do more of. But then there's that other thing you talk about, access. And access can be defined in multiple ways. When I say access, I mean access to elk. Either putting more elk on places that we currently have access to, or figuring out how do we get access to places where the elk want to be right now and disperse them and get them moving across the landscape. And that is the big challenge. That's the harder one. I think it's the harder one to convince people to put their time into because, last night our local RMEF committee had a meeting. Who wants to start meeting once a week every January through March to sit around and say, all right, who's going to take charge of the meals? Who's going to take charge of the venue? Well, fortunately, we have about 30 really dedicated people who realize that, and they just live it and breathe it. And at the end of a banquet cycle, I don't know, our chapter raises, I don't know, two to 300,000 a year net after all the costs and everything. And they get to see where that eventually gets leveraged by RMEF into a lot of access. So that's one of the many ways. Right now, the legislatures are in session, and I hate to tell you how much time I've spent talking to lobbyists and legislators in the last week. But when management actions come up, if in your state, I know this is hard for the person from Illinois to come out to Idaho or Montana or wherever and have much influence in it, but properly funding our agencies, pushing away the crazy political attacks on wildlife and wildlife management.
Yeah.
They're just when we get onto the access side, there are so many ways and little fingers that define or support what access to elk really is. And attending your game and fish meetings, attending the commission meetings, I know people are like, that's just not me. I don't like doing that. Well, I get it. Most of us don't. When I'm there at those meetings, it's not like, boy, this is the best thing I could have done today. I'm really glad my wife is home alone cooking her own dinner tonight while I drive home from this meeting. Said nobody.
Yep.
But it's all part of that. So however people want to participate in it, whether it's going out and doing the things you mentioned, hunting black bears, and now that black bear isn't going to eat 4 elk calves this year, or whatever it might be.
Yep.
We're lucky that so many people jump in some way, shape, or form to do it. And, I wish I had all the answers, but I don't. I just got a long list of ways you can do it, but I don't have a one silver bullet of, well, here's what we got to do, and tomorrow the problem will be solved. We can all go home.
It's going to be like, it's not going to be an overnight thing, and it's not going to be a one-time thing. It's just something we've got to do consistently, and it's not like we're going to win. It's not like we're going to be like, all right, we got to a point where now we can just go and enjoy the fruits of what we've done. It's going to be, hey, if I want to have a better elk hunt next fall, I've got to be doing things right now. And then as soon as elk season's over next year, I've got to be doing those same things or finding other things. And, maybe it's not in the cards for a non-resident in Florida to come to Idaho in April and hunt bears.
Yeah.
Maybe, there's a lot of limitations and different things, but I think overall, everybody's able to contribute. And like we've talked, being a member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is like stage 1, like 0.0. Yeah, it's like every elk hunter needs to be that $35, whatever minimal amount it is, it's going back into that fight. Yeah. And then from there are other levels. You can be supporting member, you can be life member, you can volunteer at banquets, and the money that's raised there goes back into it. And the more effort and energy you bring into those banquets, the more successful they're going to be. There are projects out in the field that sometimes you can get involved in. There's hunting predators. There's, like you said, just being aware of legislation that's coming through in your state that might close off access, or legislation you can support that might open access. There's a whole bunch of things, and it isn't fair to expect a handful of people to do all those things. I think we all need to be involved and just pick what we can do and make sure that we're doing it, and not just doing the minimum. But if we want to get the most out of elk hunting, it might take more than contributing just the minimum, and maybe doing a little more. And if we all do a little more, those little bit of efforts are going to turn into bigger gains down the road.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you brought this up, because Marcus and I have just scheduled out 5 videos that talk about how Congress has kind of left us holding the bag. And I mean, I don't want to do this just because Congress is makes themselves such an easy target. But they do. And we're talking about why better land management would put more elk or deer or whatever in places that are accessible to us.
Yeah.
There's so many little tweaks Congress could make that would provide better habitat for wildlife on public land. So if we can't get access to some of those elk that have went to the better habitat on private land, how about this crazy weird thought of let's create good wildlife habitat on the federal lands?
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Well, and I mean, we don't need to go into the full thing, but the whole Utah, suing to get control of the BLM, I think that's one of the big misinformation campaigns out there is, they're trying to utilize that as saying, well, we can manage it better than the federal government can. And we might have better ideas on how it can be managed, but we don't have the budget to be able to do it. And that's the part that they just aren't seeing out there. And so we've got to find a way to leverage those who are in charge of it, who have the budget to do it the right way. And I think that's a bigger chore. But trying to say, well, the solution is get it in the state's control. Yeah, on the surface, listen, I'm 100%. Right. Yeah. I want my state to make the decisions for what happens in my state. But I also realize the history of all of the states that have been given land and what they've done with it. And what they've done with it is not make it more accessible. They've privatized it and gotten rid of access to it. And so if access is at the heart of what we really want there, getting behind that push is not the right energy.
Yeah. So as we're scripting all this, I didn't know this, but this new DOGE or whatever, Department of Government Efficiency that's being put together, I'm listing off all these federal laws that if you just tweak this, they'd change that. If you just tweak this, we'd get rid of the litigators, we'd get rid of the courts having all the blah, blah, blah. And Marcus is like, that's it. I'm submitting your name. I guess there's some list out there where you can submit your name to be an advisor or on this council of Doge people or whatever. He's like, your name's getting submitted. I'm like, no, Marcus, it's not like I have time for anything else. And
all right,
but
anyhow, so the 7 people listening to this podcast need to do the same thing. Submit Randy Newberg as a member for the DOGE, and he's going to change America for us. So that's a call to action. Everybody go submit Randy's name. We want Randy.
No, it's but being the accountant who reads a lot of tax law, I read a lot of federal law. And you go and you look at all these little federal laws, and you don't need to throw the whole thing away. Like all these litigation things, all these things that gum up really good ideas the Forest Service or BLM come up with. There's about 4 laws that if you just went and tweaked them a little bit, problem solved. We wouldn't have this, crisis of federal land management.
Yep. I think a lot of those laws are developed with the right intent, but then to appease the 2 more votes they need to get them through, they tweak it to do this or they add this. And it's no different than different bills we see coming through legislature. Yeah. It's the bill itself is good, but then they add these little riders and they're trying to sneak them through and say, well, I'm only going to do that if you add this to it. And like, well, that doesn't affect me. So I'll add that.
Right.
And then it's like, whoa, I don't agree with the whole thing here, but the heart of it's good. And like you said, there's so many laws that would accomplish what they were intended to accomplish if they didn't get muddied up. And
yeah. So I kind of have my short list. I think it's 6 pieces of federal legislation that just need some little tweaks. And, all these groups that say we just need to sell the federal lands or we need to give them to the states and let them sell them. I'm like, well, you're in Congress. How about you work on these 6 things here? It's crickets. I thought the mandate we sent you folks to Congress for was to fix things, to drain the swamp and to do a better job of managing our federal lands. Here's your chance.
Here's where we start.
Yeah. They have no interest in it. So this is a congressional problem. Everything that, whether it's the fact that elk no longer find good habitat on federal lands, that's a congressional problem that could be fixed.
Yep.
Whether it's, you name it. there's a back to my earlier point of why Congress makes themselves such an easy target. They are there are property managers, and they're completely derelict. They're a bunch of lazy bums who want nothing to do with the hard work and effort it's going to take to tweak a few things and get better federal land management. So there's a reason none of them want to be on my other podcast anymore. I used to be able to convince some of these congressional people to come on the Randy Newberg Unfiltered podcast. Anymore, I can't even get a return email from the clerk, let alone a phone call back from the chief of staff. So, no, I figure I must have hit the sore spot, Corey, when I just boiled it down to the fact that Congress, you could fix it all. Get with the program. Oh well.
Man, I'm just looking here. How do we nominate somebody to the DOJ? I'm going to see if I can find that, and we're going to include that in a future podcast here. We've got to get Randy Newberg's name in there.
No, they'd have to fire me the first day.
No, you know what? You're disruptive, and that's what we need, and that's honest. I mean, that's what that whole panel or the whole committee is doing. It's disrupting the way things have been done, because the way things have been done haven't worked. And I think when it comes to access and improving habitat and managing resources, the way things have been done the last 30 or 40 years hasn't really worked out to the benefit of wildlife and the public. So I think some of your ideas need to be not only voiced on a podcast, but voiced into action.
Oh, why did I bring that up, Corey? Now we're gonna get inundated with emails about that. But Marcus might have beat you to the punch.
Well,
he's like, I'm so tired of hearing about all these ideas that seem doable and nobody does anything. I'm gonna nominate you. I'm like, well, I don't know if that Doge or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's even within their responsibility, because my worry is they're going to come up with all kinds of ideas, and Congress is going to have a million reasons why none of them are good ideas. That's the congressional solution as well. That's not going to work. Really? Why not? Well, it's just not going to work. Huh. That's not a very good answer in the business world. You know, if your supervisor says, hey, can you tell me why we're doing it that way? Well, the other way just doesn't work. Your supervisor is going to want to know, well, why? What is it about the other way that doesn't work then? And it's Congress. There's a reason why it's hard to get business people to run for Congress, right? Or, energetic people or people with ideas. Because
Well,
don't.
I found this. There's an email address set up. It is Doge, DOGE, at mail.house.gov. Doge at mail.house.gov. And it's there to, the public can provide input and suggest areas to cut spending. I think once Randy comes out with that video, we need to email those ideas there. But also, a better idea is, how do we get Randy Newberg involved? Because and on a serious note, I don't know anyone in the hunting community, industry, whatever you want to call it, who is as knowledgeable about the history of a lot of the laws, the effects of a lot of the laws, and the solutions to a lot of the laws that affect us as hunters, whether that's access, whether that's, hunting related, whether that is funding and all of that. I've been around a lot of people, and there's nobody as knowledgeable and as passionate about those topics as Randy is. So I think that if we were to have a voice in those things, I can't think of a better person.
You have a small circle of friends you run with, Corey.
Well, they say that
I appreciate you saying
you make
all
your
that,
circle smaller, and you choose more wisely who that circle is, and you're in my circle. So that's
I guess 40 years of being involved in it and having a job that lets you dive into it really deep, and then owning media platforms where you are able to express your passion for it, yeah, that probably has exposed me to more of it than the average person would have any reason to be involved with. But yeah, well, I I can't believe I brought that up. That's the dumbest thing I've done this week. But anyhow, point of all that being is Congress could fix everything that frustrates us, and a few little tweaks. Have your congressperson get a hold of me. I'll walk them through 5 things that Congress could change that would put more elk in accessible locations.
And you're doing a video on that, right?
We're doing 5 videos on this.
We've got to share those videos, because that, I think, for the average person like myself, I don't know who to contact. I don't know what to tell them when I contact them. But if I've got a local guy that's a congressman for Idaho, and I have 5 videos that are very clearly spelling out things that are important to me, if I can just get some bullet points from that, then I can put together an email and contact them, or I can send them the link, say, you need to watch this. These are important things that are affecting me and a lot of people like me. And I think the more people we can empower with that information and who they need to send it to, not necessarily, you need to send it to Congressman so-and-so, but find out who your congressman is in your state who can make change, and share these with them and let them know this is a big issue. This isn't just a state issue. We're talking Congress. We're talking federal level issues that can help resolve some of the problems that we as hunters face very locally in our backyard.
Yeah. So, well, we'll be doing that. We're going to talk about all these things. We're going to talk about why this whole distraction of, hey, there's a good crisis we can use to get these federal lands in private hands. Let's use this as the crisis. Why that's just a distraction, because I don't care who you voted for in November. It makes no difference to me. All I care about is that you voted, and whether it's the person you voted for or voted against who has a bad idea related to hunting, fishing, access, conservation, that you'll speak up one way or the other. That's all I care about.
Totally. Well, and to that point, we look at this whole takeover of unappropriated federal lands for the states. There's a lot of conservative lawmakers and congressmen and representatives and politicians who think this is a great idea.
Right.
And I would say, I really, we had just here in the little county I live in, our county commissioners met, and they're all on board because they think about how much more access we'd have. Think about how much more of this. We have these many acres within our county that would be affected. And it's like, they don't have a clue. Like, they really don't even, I mean, not in a bad way, but they just don't understand what's going to happen when there's a forest fire on that land. Who's going to fight that? Where's that money coming from? Is it coming from the county because the county already is in the deficit? Is it coming from the state because the state would be bankrupt in about 3 days of fighting a major wildfire? Where's this budget coming from? Yes, it's a good idea up front, but the long term, one thing like that, the first thing they're going to do, and the only option they have is, well, let's sell it because we've got to recoup our money.
Yeah. And, you and I live in the heart. There's 200 million acres of federal land that are considered critical habitat under the Endangered Species Act. Where I live, within 200-mile radius, where you live within a 200-mile radius, let's say we snapped our fingers and these all became state-controlled and state-managed lands. So long as the ESA is as it's written, they are not doing anything that the feds could do.
Yep.
Because they're going to end up in court. They're going to be sued till the ends of time, and they're going to find sympathetic judges who will agree with them. Yep. So this whole notion so that's why I call it a distraction, right? And I think most people agree that regardless of who you voted for, there's going to be a shakeup in the next 2 years, maybe even the next 4 years. And we have a window of opportunity during that shakeup process to tackle some of these things. So let's not burn all of our energy and focus over here at the shiny object that these privateers want us to focus on. Let's focus on doing the right thing and managing these lands better.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Man,
we better get off this soapbox.
Well, I can't wait. I was going to ask you, what the 5 things are, but we'll have to save that for another podcast. But I'd love to at least get a surface level when you start creating the videos of what you're talking about. Because I think I already know I'm going to agree 100% with you. I've known you long enough to know that when you start talking affecting change at the law level and tweaking things to make things better, there's no personal gain at the heart of it. It is what's going to make things better for wildlife, and you've got a track record that's proven that. So I'm excited to hear that. But I think that's a full podcast of talking about that.
All right, I'll send you the outline. It's about 20 pages. Well, Corey, I got to go film a workout. Don't laugh out loud.
Is this a Mountain Tough workout on how to overcome bacterial pneumonia?
It's a workout. I'm not sure if we're filming the actual workout this time. I think it's more of a, hey, you got through some reason to quit. I'm not Mountain Tough right now. I'm like couch potato tough because I laid on the couch for. You know how quickly you lose that?
Oh, I do, unfortunately, yeah.
At age 60, I lose it way quicker than I did at age 40.
Yep.
And the comeback is way harder. So anyhow, I'm not sure what they're going to film, but I was supposed to be there a minute ago. And you got basketball practice, so we better go.
Yep. Well, just a quick reminder, Destination Elk is launching on Wednesday, January 15th on the Elk 101 YouTube channel. So the episode 1 is done. We've got it edited, reviewed, everything. It's loaded and ready to go. And it's an hour and a half long, and it's incredible. It's
an hour and a half episode?
Yep. And these are, when you have 4 teams, the nice thing is on a day when it's slow for most people, somebody's got some action. So we're able to keep the episodes fairly entertaining and not slow because of that. But on the day when there's a lot of action, and that it makes some longer episodes. But I've watched it 4 times now, going through it just to dial it in. I have to watch it start to finish every time. And it never once has felt like an hour and a half. So that tells me, because I get bored watching our own stuff really quickly, and to watch it that many times, that long, and to think every time, oh my gosh, that was really, really good. I'm excited to start sharing these. So we just launched the trailer on the YouTube channel, and it's pretty exciting. But episode 1, we're going to do a live chat at 6:00 Mountain Time, and then the episode 1 is going to launch at 7:00 p.m. Mountain Time, and that's on Wednesday, January 15th.
All right. Well, we're going to get this to the editor and get this thing turned around before the 15th, Corey.
Sweet.
All right.
Okay.
You have a good day.
You too. Good luck. Make sure they know that you've got a lung condition that you're overcoming, and don't let them push you too hard.
Yeah, the other day when I was over there, they said, hey, we're trying to film something. We can't have some lunger over here coughing and hacking like that. You need to smoke. Go outside. All right.
Awesome. Good luck.
Take care, Corey.
Yep.
Thanks, folks.